Hello, everyone. Happy
Hello.
Wednesday. Good to see you all. Welcome to education series that Amber and I have been fortunate that we've been able to kind of co-host the last few months. So Parkinson's, Nebraska, working with PDWELL to bring you some education. We're really excited about this month's topic. I'm so privileged that Mary Spader and Deb Bialik agreed to speak with us today regarding something that I think we can all use all the time along the Parkinson's journey, but certainly this year as we all face all sorts of unknowns and craziness in the COVID era that we're in. So resilience and heart rate variability is a technique that I honestly don't even know enough about, but Mary and Deb luckily are experts. They're both therapists. Mary is the director of therapy with Enzyme Services, and Deb is a therapy resource with Enzyme Services, and I'm so fortunate to work with both of them, and I'm very grateful that they both joined us today. So I'm going to turn it over. I believe Mary is taking over the lead here first and going to introduce us to resilience and heart rate variability training. Thank you, Mary.
Yes, awesome. And Deb, did you want to say anything before I start, or are you good?
I'm good, Mary Spader. You
Okay.
take it away.
Okay, thanks. Well, oh my gosh, I'm honored to be here with all of you today. I just want to say that Parkinson's is near and dear to my heart. My mother lived with me for 6 years during, while she was in her later stages of Parkinson's. So I'm very familiar with the disease and the disease process. And again, it's something that I have great interest in and great hope for too as well. So I wanted to start off by just talking about a concept called the R factor. Urban Meyer, for those of you who are big sports fans, he is a pretty famous college football coach. And his later years were at Ohio State, where he wrote this book, Above the Line, and practiced a lot of the principles behind this with his team as they won, I think, 3 or 4 championships. But his line that he used often with his players was that we don't control the events in our life and we don't directly control the outcomes, but we always have control over how we choose to respond. So he kind of, he didn't coin that idea, but he did coin the phrase of event plus the response equals the outcome. And that, you know, it's how we respond to the stresses that are coming at us. We have no control right now over many things that are in our lives, but our response to that is where kind of our freedom is, and where our where we have where our control is. And will directly impact the outcome. Now, when you think of this relative to stress or our health, if we allow a stressful event to take over how we respond, it's going to have a great impact on our physiology and actually change, you know, has the potential to change our lives if we're not learning how to control our responses rather than our reactions to the stressful events. So I guess the question will come up, you know, how do you train that, right? How do you train how you respond? And then why are some people so good at it? And why do others just seem to, you know, become very emotionally involved with everything that comes at them? And I think this is where, you know, Deb and I got very, very curious when we started working with some cardiologists about 8 years ago. And these cardiologists were actually talking about heart rate variability training relative to stress with their patients that had a cardiac event. And, you know, we were the kind of the same thing as what, you know, Sherry said, thinking, well, what is heart rate variability training? You know, are they talking about interval training? And that didn't make a whole lot of sense with us with, you know, cardiac patients. So we became very, very curious about, you know, why they were talking about the power of the heart actually versus, you know, cognitive therapy type of responses to stress. They were actually talking about this heart control and our response to stress more than anything else. So we became highly curious and started to dig in. So this is a heartbeat. This is actually EKG reading. And there's something called your QRS complex, which, you know, anybody who studies EKGs will know what that is. And then there's these peaks that are where the R's are. So those R to R intervals actually have tiny little microsecond variations. And, you know, there was once thought that the heart was a metronome beat. I know when I was in physical therapy school, I didn't learn about heart rate variability. And in fact, when I took the heartbeat of my patients, I would just record, 72 beats per minute. And I didn't think about that there were actual variations in between these beats. But it's actually sort of where all the magic to your health is, within these beat to beat variations, and actually a very, very accurate window into sort of the overall stress response and health response of the autonomic nervous system, to be able to look at this in an individual. You actually want a higher heart rate variability versus heart rate variability. And I know that can sound a little bit confusing, but if you think of it as high adaptability, like a flexible heart that is easily able to respond to stress in the environment, versus a heart rate that is very, very, very low, low interval, or very, very low, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm sorry, low variations in beat to beat intervals. And that is associated with low adaptability and sort of a almost inflexible heart, where you react and respond very differently. And in fact, if you take heart rate variability readings of children, you'll see that children very naturally have high heart rate variability when they come into the world and when in their youth. And this will naturally progress with age, or a disease process, and also how you respond to stress in your life. Heart rate variability changes depending on how your body is adapting to the stresses in the environment. So low adaptability or low heart rate variability is associated with an imbalance of your heart and mind. So it might be associated with low spirits or depression or being exhausted, and also health issues are very much associated with low heart rate variability. Versus that high heart rate variability is sort of the opposite end of the spectrum, where you're going to have just a greater sense of well-being and probably better sleep, enhanced cognitive performance, and lower risks for some of the health issues that are associated with stress. Now, it turns out that the heart rhythms are very easily able to be trained. And the key kind of to where your heart rhythms get trained is with emotions. There's kind of an exploding area of science called neurocardiology going on right now, that actually talks about a very powerful sort of brain within the heart. And your heart responds to how you react emotionally to things in your life. So negative emotions trigger what's called our fight or flight response, or trigger our autonomic nervous system to go into more of a sympathetic nervous system response. And over time, this constant fight or flight response actually influences our heart patterns. So when we learn, and I'm going to teach the techniques today, to pause and reset to our positive emotions for just brief periods throughout the day, you're actually training your heart rhythms, and you're training how you respond to stress. So this is a healthy heart rhythm. When I talk about a rhythm, it's a little different than an EKG reading. The bottom of the x-axis has our EKG reading, and then it's mapped with these dots that show the reading over time. A healthy heart rhythm will actually be this nice coherent sine wave. So if you think of something that's coherent in nature, a coherent wave of light is more concentrated and able to, have more influence on something that someone might be able to do versus maybe just like a laser versus just a light bulb, which has a diffuse kind of energy going everywhere. So when you track these heart rhythms over time, it's this coherence that causes kind of a rhythmic stability within your nervous system. Now, an incoherent pattern, as you can imagine, is generated, and these are actually heart rhythms that our HeartMath Institute has, within their research and training, has published. But these rhythms happen when we're in a state of frustration or anxiety or worry or irritation or any of those other emotions that you associate with just something negative within your body. You actually are producing an incoherent heart rhythm when that happens. When you're able to shift into positive emotions like appreciation or love or care, your heart rhythm responds to that, and it actually generates this coherent this coherent sine wave, which then has an influence on your blood pressure, your respiratory rate, on all sort of your bodily systems to settle down your nervous system. So again, this low variability or low adaptability in heartbeats causes the nervous system to essentially be out of sync, whereas a high variability in heartbeats causes this nervous system to be in coherence, which will improve all your aspects of health and performance. Now, it's pretty well documented right now that we live in a very stress-related society, or your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system are what make up that autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system is not controlled by your cognitive thinking. This is completely controlled by very primitive responses. Sympathetic nervous system is absolutely necessary when you're in an actual terrifying situation, or you have to slam on your brakes in the car, or you have to respond quickly to an event. Let's say your child is about to go out into the pool area. You're not cognitively thinking through what you do when you slam on the brakes or you run outside. You are jumping into action, and that's your sympathetic nervous system firing away. Your parasympathetic nervous system is associated with rest and digest, and sort of everything comes back into sort of this rest period. The challenge is that when we're constantly in a state of fight or flight, your body doesn't know the difference between maybe just a worry about let's say you're concerned about the health of one of your children, and you wake up in the morning and that's on your mind, the health of your child, and right away your system goes into sympathetic mode, where you start to go into fight or flight in little microdoses within your system. And those microdoses release cortisol and other hormones into your body that over time are very detrimental to your overall health. But again, you cognitively aren't aware of this happening necessarily. It's just the emotion that you put into it first thing in the morning, or maybe throughout the day. And that's just one example. There might be many examples. Maybe you're worried about, the pandemic. Maybe there's a financial concern. Whatever it is, it's the exact same response. There's no little, tiny response. You go into fight or flight. And fight or flight is sort of, if it's not modulated or checked, it can be sort of how you run throughout your day, sort of looking for threats in the environment, and looking for things that might trigger emotionally with you. And that becomes a very dangerous way to live over time. This is actually the fight or flight response that happens, just so you kind of had a visual. The amygdala is this organ in the brain that is very primitive part of your primal brain, or what's has been called the reptilian brain. this whole part above the amygdala is your cortex and your neocortex, and this is where you, your thinking brain. But when a fight or flight situation happens, the amygdala actually reacts to the threat, and all these things happen within the body in order to help you respond. And then the adrenal cortex releases the cortisol for continued alertness. Now, the amygdala is a pretty fascinating organ because it's found to be actually imprinted with memories of things that we have created in our lives that are fearful. Whether that memory is, for example, being embarrassed in front of a classroom, or a dog ferociously biting, or not bite, maybe, well, biting, of course, but maybe ferociously barking at you when you were 3 years old and you hardly even remember it. But emotionally, your amygdala is constantly looking for that threat. It's a very,
I listen to it.
again, it's like a reptilian part of our brain where it's looking for the threats that we create within our environment. When we do have that amygdala reaction, we actually completely disable our higher cortex. So if you explode at somebody, you know, and get upset with somebody over something that your amygdala decided was a threat to you, and then afterwards you're like, oh my gosh, why did I react like that? It wasn't that big of a deal, but you actually, yelled or screamed or whatever it was. You actually, just disabled your higher thinking mind from being able to control your response. So response and react is kind of two very different things, because in a response, you're able to access your higher cortex in order to come up with an appropriate response to a situation. And this is, with our children in school, HeartMath and heart rate variability training is becoming more and more utilized, because children, especially when they might learn the material and have, it's very apparent they're learning in class, they're participating, or they're turning in homework, whatever it is. And when they get to a test, some children are so full of anxiety that they're not able to access their thinking brain through the test. So they go into it in a state of anxiety, and they're not able to answer as they would had they been in a calm state and able to think through some of their problems. But again, kids are absolutely fascinating with this training because they learn it very, very quickly. We take a little longer, but that doesn't mean we can't do it. So constant stimulus of the sympathetic nervous system, again, makes a chaotic nervous system. Now, this chaotic nervous system, again, is what's going to inhibit our cortical function, and it's going to make it very difficult for us to understand, how to better respond to stressful situations if we're constantly in this sort of state of stress. So what we're talking about today is essentially establishing a new baseline with how we react to stress. Again, we're all born, with different genetics, and also different heart rate variability based on those genetics and how our parents responded to stress, and grandparents. That's all kind of how we come into the world. But then the events throughout our early childhood, especially our early childhood and our youth, have a big impact on how we then are kind of imprinted to go into our adult lives, and then function. So when we learn heart rate variability and how to train our heart rhythms, we're actually establishing a new baseline, so that when you do some of the practices I'm going to show you today, you'll start to notice that the same worries that were there for you, a period of time ago, they might not be as big of a worry for you as you learn to modulate your autonomic nervous system, and you learn to balance all that through, again, tapping into that power of the heart. Now, I talked a little bit about this company, HeartMath. There are a few different, I guess I should say several different companies that make heart rate variability training monitors. Now, we love working with HeartMath technology. They are founded by a group of physicians and scientists and researchers, and they're actually the original manufacturers of the technology, and also the original researchers into a lot of things with heart rate variability training. And Deb and I were both certified by, actually he was a pediatrician, and was, you know, absolutely phenomenal with his training. And they also partner a lot with healthcare workers and people within in healthcare, which you know, kind of fit directly into what we were doing when we first started learning about this about, I guess it's about 7 years ago now. So it's a basic biofeedback device that is used to capture the heart rhythms. And it is used on any kind of smartphone, and very, very, you know, simple device to use. And I guess I should emphasize that you do not need a biofeedback device to learn how to do heart rate variability training. It's a lot of fun to see your progress, and it's, you know, pretty fascinating to have the device to do it. But what I'm going to show you today can be done, you know, anywhere. And this isn't about anything. This isn't about any piece of device at all. This is about your internal ability to control this. And I, you know, it's, if we rely on devices to be able to do this, I think we'll be a little bit crestfallen. But I think if we understand that this ability is within you and you're able to control this, it feels pretty good. So I'm going to walk you through one of the techniques right now, and it's really simple. And it has to do with sort of very much finding a place of positive emotions within your heart. Now, one of the great things about heart rate variability training is, you know, unlike meditation or some of the other things that you might have been taught, you don't have to leave a room to go do it. You don't have to, you know, have a quiet environment to go do it. You can actually do heart rate variability training once you get good at it, even while you're talking to somebody, because you can be aware of when anxiety is coming up or when you're not listening to somebody and control it. But initially, when you're learning it, it may take a little bit more of like a heart-centered focus. So I'm not sure where everybody's at right now, but if you're able to get just in a comfortable position, and if you're able to close your eyes, that'll help a lot just with activating the power of your heart. So I'd like you to just close your eyes. And the first thing I'd like you to do is just slow your breathing down. Just be aware of your breathing. Even if you can slow it down just a little bit, you're already tapping into your parasympathetic nervous system, and you're turning off the fight or flight. And now I'd like you to just shift your awareness to your heart. You might put your hand on your heart, or you might just picture a warm light in the center of your chest. But just be aware of your heart as you keep your breathing nice and slow. Now I'd like you to make a sincere attempt to bring up a feeling of gratitude and appreciation, maybe for a loved one, maybe for just a beautiful sunset, maybe the cool morning air, maybe a pet. I don't want you to think about it at all. I want you to feel a feeling of gratitude and appreciation for someone or something in your life. And just let your heart feel that emotion. Keep your breathing nice and slow. As you feel that deep gratitude. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. So we did this training for about a minute right now. And what I usually ask people to do is to do 2 minutes of this training in the morning and in the evening initially. A couple things to add. The positive emotion, I have a couple pictures on the screen here because it's so different for everybody. Some people love a feeling of accomplishment. Some people just love the peacefulness of a sunset. For some people, it's a pet. And for some people, it's holding the hand of a loved one. Whatever it is, that the idea, this isn't about your brain. This isn't about thinking this through. This is the time for the brain to be quiet and for your heart to take over. And the more you tap into the emotion of the heart and just feel that, gratitude is sort of a shortcut. So a lot of times I go to gratitude, but there's other emotions there, right? Courage, joy, love, excitement. There's other emotions there that are very, very beneficial to your heart. When you tap into that heart emotion, your heart actually is able to release hormones into your body, trigger the release of DHEA into your body, and very, very healing hormones. It's like you're microdosing anti-aging, anti-disease hormones. When you tap into that positivity and that love within the heart, that the heart intelligence is able to take over. And the studies that we have, that Deb and I have looked at, we're talking 2 minutes a day of training. It's not sitting for half hour, it's shifting and doing that. And I always say train outside of game day. So you're not going to, well, you can, but it's more difficult to try this when you're in an actual stressful situation. But I'm going to teach you something too right now for when you're actually in a stressful event. Oops. Okay. Now, HeartMath and heart rate variability training is very connected to being able to control anxiety. Negative emotions actually fuel anxiety, and then these anxiety reactions actually become etched into our neural circuitry. Relieving the anxiety, again, is an individual inside job. So this is, like a very internal thing that'll happen. It's not anything anybody's going to be able to necessarily teach your brain. This is an individual thing that you'll be doing, and again, like an inside job. And there is a power that is within you that is stronger than worry or anxiety or fear, and that's the power of your heart. And I want you to deeply understand that. Now, this isn't just me talking or HeartMath talking. If you go on to heartmath.org, which is their research site, the evidence and the articles that come out about this heart intelligence and this tapping into this, it's not only exploding right now, but it's absolutely fascinating what can be done when you can tap into that ability to override that fear and anxiety and that circle of that kind of doom loop that happens when we're in the state of anxiety. So at the root of anxiety is some type of fear. Usually a security or a stability is threatened. And for fear, you can't rationalize, visualize, or think your fears away. The emotions pretty much call the shots. So, even if you were to be given maybe a mantra to say throughout the day, or to visualize, this whatever thing is being all better, if you're not emotionally attached to that mantra or to that visualization, there's no power there, because your emotions are pretty much what is establishing what's going on. So if you're thinking throughout the day, I don't know, everything is well, or let's use the example of a son or daughter being well, or Amanda is fine, Amanda is fine, Amanda is well, Amanda is well. Yet we're emotionally very upset by that whole thought of it. we might be overriding our emotions with anything we're being taught to do with our brains or our minds. And again, anxiety is not something that's happening to us. It's actually something we are creating through our emotional investment and our habits and how much we're involved with that emotionally. So again, we learned a little bit about the amygdala today, and the amygdala searches for threats. It searches for fear for health, insecurities, comparisons, fear of being rejected. These are just some examples of just how we kind of have this fear arsenal that we make up throughout our lives. And if it's left unchecked, that fear response starts to be the norm. And we, essentially can turn our power over to it. Now, overcare is actually a word, but it's something that we start to care too much about something within our lives. And overcare occurs when your mind turns generally our caring, loving emotions into a mental and emotional drain, because we start to focus only on that. And overcare becomes, it can be very detrimental again to your health if you're constantly giving your worry, anxiety over to it. So overcare can be unreasonable expectations of yourself or others. Perfectionism, excuse me. Perfectionism is sort of a rigidity that insists that things have to be a certain way. And the intelligence of the heart will allow for a greater ability to discern overcare from care. I'm not sure how to go back, but even this famous phrase from Benjamin Franklin, nothing is more fatal to health than an overcare of it. So if we think of, I'm going to show you another pretty quick technique that can be very, very beneficial for emotional refocusing. I put up here on the board just some pretty common things that we might be feeling when we think of negative emotions. There's many, many others, but these are some of the common ones, right? Feeling tense or resentful, fearful, worried, guilty, blaming, numb, anxious, bored, stubborn, overwhelmed, sad, self-blaming, angry, or depressed. So the tool taught by HeartMath is you first notice and name what you're feeling. So when you notice something doesn't feel right, actually try to name what you're feeling. Like last night, I was late for an event at the school for my children, and the fire truck went through. So we were at three lights before I was able to progress through the stoplight. And I started just, getting very out of sorts. And I was actually able to name what I was feeling. Anxiety over being late, maybe blame for not leaving early enough, worried that I was going to miss the meeting. So you name it, and then you gently focus on your heart and you tell yourself ease, and you actually breathe in ease. And I know that sounds really simple, but it is a very powerful thing to name an emotion, focus on the heart, and then just breathe in ease. And naming the emotion tends to give it a little less control over your body, because you're actually saying, I don't know exactly what you are. I've seen you before, and you're, whatever. And then you're shifting intentionally to your heart, and you're breathing in ease. So that's one way to kind of handle anxiety right in the moment. So this might be your within the game day, train or within the game exercise to do. And then outside the game, when you're doing your heart rate variability training, for those 2 minutes morning and night are the other tools that you would want to do. So when to use the HeartMath tool, maybe you want to clear anger or hurt. When you notice that you start to feel overwhelmed before sleep is wonderful. Immediately when you wake up is a very interesting time, because for a lot of us, for whatever reason, we wake up from a peaceful or maybe not so peaceful sleep. But at some point we're awake and the anxieties just start pouring in. So HeartMath training at the beginning of the day can establish a different neurological baseline for you when you go into your day. I just wanted to give a brief slide on some of the many different organizations using it. Heart rate variability training is very much being used with our Army and our military and our police force as well, because they're being asked to be alert, awake, aware of an event, be able to respond to an event, and then also being able to reduce their anxiety, because when you think about facing a life-threatening event like a police officer, when they come out of that event, cortisol has a half-life of 72 hours. So it's not only being released during the event, but it's going to still continue to be released for 72 hours afterwards. So if they go home in the evening and the dog barks or the children are crying, they're kind of in a higher state of stress. So they're being taught these techniques in order to get themselves to neutral, at least to neutral, maybe even into a state of coherence, so that they're able to function then the rest of the day. This was studies conducted on over 11,500 people. This was 6 to 9 weeks of training. So you can kind of see these very large increases in focus, sleep, and calmness, and then great reductions in anxiety, fatigue, and overall depression. These are some of the biofeedback devices, but I wanted to share at least a case study with you, because I think this one might resonate. But this is my mom. This is one of the therapists working with her that's been working with our organization. He was one of the first people we hired, and same beautiful Roger, still there after 21 years working with my mom. She developed atypical Parkinson's about 2 years after my father passed away. And so it manifested more, it looked more like a stroke with her. So her left side was far more impaired than her right. And she was living at home doing fairly well until she fell and broke a hip. And then within that same year, she fell and broke the other hip. So this was her in her second round of therapy, still looking great. I always love this picture because I'm very, very proud of our therapy programs and our therapists, because they know how to bring the joy out no matter how intense the situation is in our patients' lives. And for my mom, this was, her realizing she would not go home alone again. And yet Doji, who's one of the first assistants that we hired 21 years ago, who's still there, is making her laugh and smile. And every time I'd come into the therapy department, this was my mom. So my mom went home with me after that second fall, and her symptoms developed fairly rapidly over the years. And she was at a point where her left arm was greatly impaired, and her right arm, she was having even difficulty like pushing the numbers to a computer screen. And then eventually, unfortunately wasn't able to speak with us. And so it was very, very anxiety-filled situation, because I knew she was anxious, even though she was completely cognitively aware of everything around her. She was very, very anxious about this disease process, of course, and what was going to happen. Wasn't sleeping well at night. So I tried HeartMath with my mom, and I had very little expectations for how things were going to go, because at this point, this was, fairly, later stages of where she was at in her life. And I just didn't know where we were going to go with this. But so we hooked up the biofeedback device to an iPad, because that was much easier for her to use. And you can see it clipped to her ear over here. And she just loved it. This was her favorite thing to do every day. And we pretty much just started with, we would turn on, she was a pianist, so we would turn on piano music. And then I would talk her through what I talked everybody here through today, maybe a little bit slower with her, and spending more time on just helping her bring up some of the positive emotions. And it was super fascinating for her to watch her responses. And it was a piece of control in her life when she felt like everything was out of control, and that, she things were happening to her that she couldn't stop. So this was her chance to just control it every day. And so every time when I'd come home and I'd ask her, Mom, do you want to do HeartMath? And she'd, I'd get the signal that we used for yes, which was touching her nose. She got really tired of touching her nose after a while, but anyhow, these were sort of her readouts, which you'll understand more as you understand the biofeedback device. But you can kind of see these look very similar to the frustration heart map waves that I showed you earlier in the training. And these test tubes down here are sort of where people are at with coherence. So low coherence is red, medium is blue, and green is high. But you can see over time, my mom was just a champ with this. She learned very, very quickly, just like anything in her life, and was able to really tap into that heart intelligence and just calm herself down. Even her heart rate went down when we would do this. And for my mom, it meant better sleep at night. And actually, when the caregivers would do just a little bit with her before, breakfast or before ADLs, performance was much better with her when she would do a little bit of this training. Another example, this is my son when he was 15 years old, just having a pretty awesome life at the school he was at. And out of the blue, he developed an autoimmune disease, and we just had no idea where this came from, but it was there in our lives, and it completely knocked him off his feet. He lost about 40 pounds in a period of only a few weeks, and obviously was in Children's Hospital here. And I was living over in this section. You can see my laptop. This was my quarters over in the corner of his room. But the doctors told us that because of his condition and the pain levels, he would probably be in there a few months. And we just thought, like, gosh, that's just no way. So we this is his football buddies that all came to visit him in the hospital. So we started heart rate variability training with Ryan, and Ryan had 10 out of 10 pain. And that was the biggest compromise to his healing, was his pain levels. And you can see this heart rhythm map. And I always say, if a child were to draw pain, I feel like this is what they would draw, because this is just very, very sick person, and very, very compromised condition he was in. So I called Deb and I said, we're going to start heart rate variability training with him. And Ryan agreed. So this was about 8:12 in the morning. And then I came in again, or, we did it again at 11:03 in the morning. And then, again in the afternoon. And you can start to see how these are starting to get to be coherent. And then you can see these test tubes shifting down here to a green, which means that he's no longer releasing, cortisol because of the stress of the pain, that he actually might be releasing some really cool other hormones into his body to counteract this pain response. And my gosh, he was just, I remember calling Deb, like, you're never going to believe this. He just is doing beautifully with this. And the nurses at Children's Hospital kept coming in and, saying, what is this? What are you guys doing? Because he's not using as much morphine and he's improving. So morphine was discharged on this day. This was day 5. And we were able to get him off the morphine. And, I asked Ryan, because these are pretty phenomenal sine waves that he was getting. And granted, he was 15, so it's a lot easier for kids. But I remember asking him, like, what do you think about her? What happens when you're in this state where you're able to do this? And he just said to me, he goes, Mom, I don't think, because I just turned that off. And that's kind of the lesson that, we should have in our lives, right? Just turn that off for a few seconds every day and allow your allow your body to heal, allow that to heal. So this was, I think he went home shortly after that. Wanted to share one other story that is pretty powerful, but for those of you that love animals, we actually radiate a magnetic field around us where we're in a state of coherence or whether we're not in a state of coherence. Whether or not you believe that, it's actually scientifically proven now that we have a field around us, and you know, we're not conscious of it, but it does affect others in our environment. And this is Josh and Mabel. And Josh and Mabel were actually hooked up to heart rate variability devices. Mabel's our dog, and Josh is the boy. And so when they were outside different rooms together, and then Josh was asked to go into the same room as Mabel and not hug her or not, you know, touch her in any way, but just sit across the room and just send her love to go into coherence, because Josh has been trained on heart rate variability, and just send her appreciation and love. And you can see how they both fell into the same heart rhythms. And then, you know, when he leaves the room, they go out of sync again. But we have a big impact on those around us. In fact, the pediatrician who taught Deb and I heart rate variability training said that once he understood and learned in depth what happens within the heart when we're out of coherence, that because he took the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm, he could not go into another patient's room without first doing heart rate variability training if he was lined up with patients throughout the day. So he would just do it as he was washing his hands, because he felt like had he carried that child's issue into his next patient rooms, he was actually doing them harm by just being out of coherence and upset about a previous condition. And I think about that a lot of times with our therapists, and you know, when they're coming into work every day, there's a lot of things in everybody's lives right now, and obviously we all handle it very differently. But if we can learn, we're teaching these techniques to our therapists so that they can learn to get into coherence before the beginning of a day, and can be better off for their patients that they're treating then, because they're not in a state of worry and anxiety while they're actually doing care to help, you know, patients heal and get better. So I wanted to, I know that was about 50 minutes, and I wanted to leave a little time for questions. This was Viktor Frankl. Many of you might recognize that name. He was a famous psychologist who was Holocaust survivor, and he you know, wrote a lot. But one of his famous quotes here, which you know, I think Urban Meyers took, Stephen Covey, many others take, because between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So I love thinking about that relative to the space between our heartbeats and that control that we actually have in our lives over our emotions, which can take over our heart. So if we can learn to do a couple of minutes of this training, and a small investment, you know, initially when we're doing this, and a couple of times during our day, the changes that can happen can be profound. And it does take the investment, it does take the time, and it does take us doing that inside work. But I get excited about teaching this because I've seen the results firsthand, of course, with my family, but also I've seen changes in just how people lead and how they are responding to the stress in their lives. And that gives me great hope that we can not be so reactionary, that we can not allow the stress to take over how we are with our lives. But that's also great hope for this improving our health and our ability to not allow the stress to deteriorate it anymore. Deb, did you want to add anything, or can you think of anything I missed in there?
Mary, you didn't miss anything. I thought it was just beautiful. I just wanted to share that you spent some time on anxiety, and I was doing a little bit of research and was really, I found it really interesting to discover that at least a third of persons with Parkinson's disease have a problem with anxiety, which, according to the research that's been done and published in MPJ, Parkinson's disease, the anxiety appears to have a greater impact adversely on the quality of life than motor impairment itself. So I thought that was really interesting, and I thought they actually, in 2018, the Parkinson's Association held a Congress to start discussing how to approach anxiety, because it's becoming a bigger and bigger concern. And what an amazing, easy way to be able to take that control back. So I just wanted to emphasize this tool as a relief from anxiety and starting to work on ways to overcome it. Really, really appreciated what you shared today. And then just one other comment on the importance of our taking care of our caregivers too. So the gift that persons with Parkinson's disease can give to their caregivers is teaching them about these tools as well. And it's a gift that gives back, because as Mary shared, when somebody is in a state of stress or anxiety and close to someone else, like the boy and his dog, it actually translates to one another. So
yeah, it's interesting, Deb, because do you remember when we first spoke to one of the founders at HeartMath, when we were first just finding out what in the world this is? We were excited for patient care and utilizing this. And Robert said, I love that you want to use this with your patients, but you need to put the oxygen on yourselves first. You need to have your therapists understand what this is and utilize it for themselves in their day. And then they're going to be better and better for their patients. And so that always, definitely was something that always stuck with me.
That's so true. I wanted to also say, while you guys are thinking of some questions, we have a link. We get if you're interested in actually purchasing an Inner Balance, we do get a partnership discount because we use them so extensively throughout our organization. So Sherry can post information on the PDWELL website for you to be able to purchase at a discount if you're interested. But again, you don't need the device. You can certainly do the heart-centered breathing without it.
Thank you, Mary and Deb, so much. Does anybody have questions? You can just unmute yourself and ask away, or if you don't want to, you can always type it in the chat box.
Sherry, Tina Morgan here. I'm just wondering, is there, not only is this going to be great for me, but I have a lot of friends who don't have Parkinson's who really could use this too. Is this recorded somewhere? Is there a way we can get it so we can do it ourselves again, listen to it and give it to friends?
Yes, it is currently on Facebook, so it will be on the Parkinson's Nebraska Facebook page to be able to watch. I will also be putting it on our website as well. There'll be a recording in just a couple of days. I'll be able to get that up there. Be on the lookout for that on our website.
Yep.
Right.
And I'm guessing, Amber, you could potentially get me the link to put it on the PDWELL website as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Anybody have any other questions? Or like I said, feel free to just ask away. Or, okay, there is something in the chat here. Don is asking, if there is a correlation to heart failure or an impact maybe on heart failure. Do you know anything about that, Mary or Deb?
Yeah, well, the heart rate variability is one of the, it's being utilized more and more because it's such a predictor for a cardiac event, for a sudden cardiac event or heart failure. So it is, if you were to take a heart rate variability on maybe, like I think of like a young 50-year-old CEO who is just emotionally upset about every little thing, and they all of a sudden have a heart attack out of the blue. And otherwise they're, you know, a fairly healthy person. But they're utilizing heart rate variability more and more as a predictor for a cardiac event. And again, it's such a beautiful tool with someone, you know, if you think about that, you know, 50-year-old who's being told just to go home and stop stressing and to find ways to de-stress, that can be anxiety ridden in and of itself, because we might not know how to de-stress if you're constantly thinking and you're in your brain all the time, and that's just your mode of doing. It becomes more and more difficult. Some people are just more naturally have done that in their lives. You know, they've maybe gone outside and seen a tree or a bird, and just like, wow, you know, or just taking that in. And it's almost like they're self-medicating, learning to do that maybe at a young age, but not everybody has done that. But it's a great question because it's very, very much related to cardiac events.
Well, and I was going to add that we actually incorporate heart rate variability training in our cardiac recovery program as one of the things that a patient can do to control their stress. It's giving you back the control. It's that R factor, like Mary said. What can you do?
Love it. Anybody else?
And if there's questions that come up, Sherry, if people are kind of processing things, please let me know, because I'd love to, you know, answer anything or do any kind of follow-up that you want. So.
Hey, that's awesome. Yeah, so feel free to, you can email myself or Amber, and we can, you know, get your questions answered or get you in contact with Mary or Deb for, you know, more information. So one of my goals is to learn more as well. So hopefully I will be able to be of more help to you directly. So. And
Sherry, HeartMath has just some, I can get you information like some of their little books, like Transforming Anxiety, the HeartMath Solution. I'm sorry, my screen's a little hard to see, but they have, you know, Transforming Anger, Transforming Depression. And then they also have some great science of the heart books. If the science interests you, it's totally fascinating. I only touched on a little bit today. I try to make it accessible so that we understand what happens, you know, within our autonomic nervous system and the relationship to the heart. But it's very, very fascinating. So I can, we can list some resources there too.
Perfect. And Mary, there's one more question in the chat if you have time. Ruth is asking if this technique is similar to meditation.
That's a great question. So meditation is awesome. If you're somebody who has been meditating, then you're probably tapping into that coherence. The difference is when you meditate, a lot of times you're getting to a state of what they call neutrality, or you're neutral within your system. So, and that's a very, very good state to be, because you're no longer releasing negative chemicals and whatever we talked about. The difference with actively tapping into your heart is you're actively generating that power. So you're not zoning out or tuning out to anything at all. You're actually within that moment, you're bringing up that emotion of joy or gratitude, and you're just allowing the power of the heart to just start going. And that's the big difference. And you can do the shift with heart rate variability training at any time. A lot of times meditators do need that, you know, quiet. And again, if people who meditate are I think it's an amazing practice. And some people are very, very good at just shutting that thinking mind off. And that's the goal for either one is to say, you know, okay, brain, you've done enough for the day. It's now, you know, a time where you can to stop the thoughts. But again, that shift to the heart and actively generating the heart power is the difference that I've learned over the years. Great question, though.
Well, thank you so much, Mary and Deb, for joining us. We so appreciate your time and the information. And again, to anyone that's on, please feel free. Kathy says she really learned a lot in the chat. So yay, Kathy, that's awesome.
Yay.
Please reach out to myself or Amber. We can always connect you and find out any information you need and help get you resources to kind of keep us all learning along this process. So
Great.
all right.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.